He is the undisputed godfather of British cinema. With a single, effortless line delivery and a heavy-lidded gaze, he defined modern cinematic cool. Over 60 years of more than 160 films, Sir Michael Caine morphed from a rebellious 1960s playboy into universally beloved, wise patriarch of Hollywood blockbusters. On screen, he was the ultimate untouchable gentleman. But behind the 2 Academy Awards and the knighthood from the Queen lies a reality that completely shatters the aristocratic illusion. At 93 years old, Michael Caine is a man who spent his entire life desperately trying to outrun the freezing, suffocating slums of his childhood. Behind the legend stands a boy crippled by rickets who was forced to wear heavy iron braces on his legs. A teenage soldier who stared directly into the eyes of death in a frozen Korean trench. A superstar who nearly drowned himself in vodka to numb the terrifying anxiety of fame. And a son who discovered a devastating 50-year-old family secret that entirely rewrote his existence. Why did a cinematic genius willingly star in terrible movies just to collect a paycheck? How did the love of one woman save him from the absolute bottom of a bottle? And what is the profound cost of fighting your way out of the gutter, only to face the undefeated enemy of old age? Before we answer, we must go back to the beginning. To understand a night at 93, you must first know the starving boy in the London mud. The iron braces, the smog of the slum, and the trench of awakening. There's a magnificent, heavily curated illusion regarding the British entertainment industry. When global audiences look at a distinguished English actor wearing a bespoke Savile Row suit, delivering lines with impeccable timing and a quiet, effortless superiority, they instinctively assume he was born into the aristocracy. We imagine a childhood composed of sprawling green estates, prestigious boarding schools, and a family tree deeply rooted in generational wealth and polished silver. But true, undeniable grit cannot be manufactured in a boarding school. It is forged in the freezing, suffocating, and merciless machinery of absolute poverty. To understand Sir Michael Caine, the man who would eventually become one of the most bankable, universally respected cinematic titans in history, you must completely erase the image of the wealthy gentleman. You must travel back to the darkest, most impoverished, and heavily polluted corners of South London. He was born Maurice Joseph Micklewhite on March 14, 1933, in the charity ward of St. Olave's Hospital in Rotherhithe. He did not arrive into a world of privilege. He arrived into an environment defined by the overwhelming smell of coal smoke, damp concrete, and the relentless, exhausting grind of the English working class. His father, Maurice Sr., was a fish market porter at the notoriously grueling Billingsgate Fish Market. He was a man who spent his life carrying massive, freezing crates of ice and fish on his back, returning home every evening smelling of the river in sheer physical exhaustion. His mother, Ellen, was a charwoman, a cleaning lady. For the older audiences watching this, especially those who remember the harsh, unforgiving economic realities of the 1930s, the Great Depression, and the agonizing struggle of blue-collar families simply trying to survive the winter, the reality of the Micklewhite household is profoundly, deeply understood. Ellen spent her days on her hands and knees, scrubbing the pristine floors of wealthy families, her joints swelling and aching, just to ensure her children had a scrap of bread to eat. They lived in a tiny, dilapidated flat with no indoor bathroom, no hot water, and no central heating. Poverty was not merely a concept. It was a physical, daily predator. And the predator did not just attack their bank account. It directly attacked young Morris's developing body. Due to the extreme lack of proper nutrition, sunlight, and the severe rationing during the outbreak of the Second World War, the young boy developed a crippling case of rickets. Rickets is a devastating disease caused by severe vitamin D deficiency, which softens and weakens the bones of a growing child. Imagine the sheer, heartbreaking reality of his childhood. The boy who would one day command a global screen with a swaggering, confident stride was physically incapable of walking properly. His fragile legs buckled under his own weight. To correct the terrifying curvature of his bones, Doctors forced him to wear heavy, clanking, restrictive iron braces on his legs. In the ruthless, primitive hierarchy of the London slums, a child wearing iron braces is an immediate, highly visible target for cruelty. He was mocked. He was alienated. He carried the heavy, dragging weight of those metal bars every single day, listening to the agonizing squeak of the hinges, dreaming of a world where he could simply run like the other boys. But the universe operates with profound, terrifying alchemy. The iron braces were meant to correct his fragile bones, but they inadvertently forged something infinitely stronger inside his chest. They forged an absolutely unbreakable, ironclad will. He learned that if he wanted to survive the mud of South London, he had to develop an impenetrable psychological armor. By the time he was a teenager, having survived the terrifying, apocalyptic bombings of the London Blitz during World War II, spending his nights hiding under kitchen tables while the sky rained absolute destruction, the boy had already witnessed more death and devastation than most men see in a lifetime. But the ultimate, defining crucible of his existence was still waiting for him. It was not waiting in London. It was waiting in the freezing, blood-soaked mud of a foreign continent. In 1952, at the age of 19, Maurice Micklewhite was drafted into the British Army's Royal Fusiliers to serve in the Korean War. He was pulled from the poverty of London and violently thrust into one of the most brutal, freezing, and merciless conflicts of the 20th century. For a young man who had spent his life dreaming of becoming an actor, discovering the magic of the cinema as a cheap escape from the slums, the reality of the Korean trenches was an absolute, suffocating nightmare. The turning point of his entire existence, the exact moment that Michael Caine, the legend, was truly born, occurred during a routine night patrol deep in a valley near the Samakon River. The pitch-black darkness of the valley was suddenly shattered by the terrifying reality of an ambush. Maurice and a small group of his fellow soldiers found themselves completely surrounded by enemy forces. The temperature was well below freezing. The air smelled of gunpowder, damp earth, and absolute, paralyzing panic. They were cut off from their unit, heavily outnumbered, and trapped in the suffocating darkness of the valley floor. At 19 years old, staring directly into the impenetrable blackness, Maurice realized with cold, mathematical certainty that he was going to die. There was no rescue coming. There was no Hollywood scriptwriter to invent a miraculous escape. The boy who had worn iron braces, the son of the fish porter and the cleaning lady, was going to bleed to death in the freezing mud of Korea, thousands of miles away from home, and the world would completely, entirely forget that he had ever existed. Reflecting decades later on the agonizing, life-defining moment in the dark, Michael stripped away the glamorous veneer of the movie star to deliver a quote of such staggering, visceral truth that it completely alters how we view his entire career. "We were completely surrounded," Michael recounted, his voice dropping into the heavy, solemn cadence of a combat veteran. "We knew we were going to die. We literally said goodbye to each other. And then we decided, if we are going to die, we are going to take as many of them with us as we can. We charged. We ran directly toward the enemy lines, and by some absolute miracle, we broke through. We knew we were going to die, and by some absolute miracle, we broke through." Listen to the profound, earth-shattering psychological impact of that specific night. He survived, but the terrified 19-year-old boy named Maurice died in that valley. The man who walked out of that trench possessed a completely rewired, radically altered human brain. From that moment on, Michael confessed, delivering the ultimate philosophy of his entire existence. "Every single minute of my life has been a bonus. I had accepted death. So when I survived, I made a promise to myself. I was going to live every single second to the absolute maximum. I was never, ever going to waste a moment." For the audiences watching this, especially the men and women who have survived their own near-death experiences, who have beaten cancer, survived a catastrophic accident, or walked away from a war zone, that sentence is the absolute, undisputed gospel of survival. When you have made peace with your own death at 19 years old, the ordinary fears of the civilian world become entirely laughable. This is the secret, psychological key that unlocks the mystery of Michael Caine's staggering, prolific career. Why did he act in over 160 movies? Why did he work with a manic, obsessive, almost frantic energy for the next 70 years? Why did he never complain about the grueling hours on a film set? Because he was a ghost operating on borrowed time. He was a man who knew exactly how cold the grave was, and he was absolutely, fiercely determined to squeeze every single drop of joy, wealth, and experience out of the universe before the clock finally ran out. In 1953, he returned to London. He had survived the physical war. But as he changed his name to Michael Caine and attempted to break into the prestigious, highly elitist world of British theater, he was about to discover that a completely different kind of war was waiting for him. The young veteran, armed with the absolute fearlessness of a man who had conquered death, was about to run headfirst into a massive, impenetrable wall. The British entertainment industry did not care about his bravery. They only cared about his thick, working-class Cockney accent. And the aristocratic directors of London were about to subject the poor boy from the slums to a humiliating 10-year-long exile that would test the absolute limits of his sanity. The Cockney curse, the 10-year exile, and the smashing of the glass ceiling. There's a polite, incredibly insidious form of violence embedded within the architecture of the British class system. It does not use fists. It does not draw blood. Instead, it relies on the quiet, devastating power of geography, pedigree, and the precise, polished pronunciation of a single vowel. When a 20-year-old Maurice Micklewhite returned to London in 1953, having survived the freezing, apocalyptic mud of the Korean War, he was a young man carrying the absolute, unshakable confidence of a ghost operating on borrowed time. He believed that because he had stared directly into the eyes of death and miraculously walked away, the civilian world of acting would simply surrender to his ambition. But as he officially changed his stage name to Michael Caine, a decision inspired a moment of desperate inspiration while looking up at a movie marquee advertising the Caine Mutiny, he was entirely unprepared for the suffocating, impenetrable wall of aristocratic snobbery waiting for him. In the 1950s, the British theatrical and cinematic establishment was entirely dominated by men who had been educated at Oxford and Cambridge. Leading men were expected to speak with the immaculate, clipped precision of received pronunciation, RP, the Queen's English. Michael Caine, however, spoke with the thick, unapologetic, and undeniably working-class rhythm of a South London Cockney. When he walked into audition rooms, towering at 6 feet 2 inches, possessing a striking, unconventional, handsome face, and the intense, hungry eyes of a survivor, the casting directors did not see a leading man. They heard his accent, and they instantly, cruelly categorized him. They told him that with a voice like his, he was genetically, mathematically disqualified from ever playing a hero, a romantic lead, or a man of intelligence. They relegated him to playing the absolute dregs of society. The dim-witted petty thief, the anonymous thug, the comic relief delivery boy. They demanded that if he ever wanted to be taken seriously, he had to completely eradicate his natural voice. He had to take expensive elocution lessons and pretend to be someone he fundamentally was not. Reflecting on this agonizing, decade-long campaign of psychological humiliation, Michael later delivered a quote of such startling, brilliant defiance that it completely rewrote the rules of British cinema. "I was told I would only ever play working-class thugs," Michael confessed, his voice dripping with the quiet, triumphant satisfaction of a man who ultimately won the war. "They told me my accent was a curse, but I realized something very early on. I was not going to change my voice. I was going to keep my accent, and I was going to force them to accept that a working-class boy could be the smartest, most sophisticated man in the room. I was going to keep my accent." Listen to the absolute, majestic stubbornness of that refusal. For the older audiences watching this, especially the men and women who were told throughout their lives that they didn't have the right education, the right background, or the right connections to succeed, yet who refused to apologize for their origins, Michael Caine's decision is an absolute, undisputed masterclass in human dignity. He was not just fighting for a movie role. He was fighting for the dignity of his fish porter father and his floor-scrubbing mother. He was declaring that the slums of Rotherhithe were just as capable of producing genius as the manicured lawns of Eton. But absolute integrity is an incredibly expensive luxury, and Michael paid for it with a brutal, agonizing decade of near starvation. From 1953 to 1963, Michael Caine endured the terrifying, grueling reality of the Hollywood and London wilderness. He performed in over 100 obscure television plays, regional theater productions, and uncredited background roles. The pay was abysmal. The conditions were humiliating. He was married briefly during this period to actress Patricia Haynes, and they welcomed a daughter, Dominique. The suffocating pressure of providing for a young family on erratic, microscopic income completely broke the marriage apart. He was a divorced, struggling actor approaching his 30th birthday, sleeping in cheap, unheated rented rooms, surviving on boiled potatoes and stolen scraps of hope. At one particularly dark, terrifying juncture during this 10-year exile, the physical deprivation nearly killed him. Michael contracted a severe, life-threatening bout of malaria, completely unrelated to his military service, but rather a direct result of his exhausted, malnourished immune system collapsing under the stress of his poverty. He lay in a freezing, damp room in London, violently shivering, sweating through his clothes, absolutely convinced that the death he had successfully dodged in the Korean trenches had finally found him in a cheap apartment. But the ghost who operated on borrowed time simply refused to expire. He crawled out of that sickbed. He continued to show up to auditions. He continued to weaponize his Cockney accent, waiting for the singular, miraculous script that would finally align perfectly with his raw, working-class gravity. In 1964, the universe, operating with its trademark, brilliant sense of dramatic irony, finally delivered the key to the kingdom, but it was wrapped in a role that the British establishment believed was entirely impossible for him to play. American director Cy Enfield was casting an epic historical war film titled Zulu, detailing the legendary 1879 Battle of Rorke's Drift. Enfield was looking for an actor to play Lieutenant Gonville Bromhead, an incredibly arrogant, deeply aristocratic, and upper-class British officer. The British producers absolutely panicked when Enfield suggested casting Michael Caine. They argued vehemently that a Cockney actor with a history of playing thugs could never, ever convince an audience that he was a sophisticated, educated officer of the Queen. They claimed it would ruin the entire authenticity of the film. But Enfield, an American who was entirely immune to the suffocating prejudice of the British class system, did not care about Michael's pedigree. He looked at the actor's tall, imposing frame, his striking blonde hair, and the intense, quiet authority of his heavy-lidded gaze, and he saw a star. Against the fierce objections of the studio, Michael Caine was cast in his first major, star-making role. The irony was magnificent. The boy from the slums, the soldier who had actually fought in the mud of a real war, was now wearing the immaculate red tunic of a British aristocrat, commanding the silver screen with an effortless, breathtaking superiority. When Zulu premiered, Michael's performance was an absolute revelation. He completely stole the film. The critics, who had spent 10 years dismissing him, were utterly paralyzed by his undeniable, commanding presence. He had successfully infiltrated the upper echelons of cinema, proving that talent completely supersedes geography. But the true cultural earthquake was yet to come. Just 2 years later, in 1966, Michael Caine secured a role that would permanently, violently shatter the glass ceiling of the British entertainment industry and completely redefine the concept of the modern leading man. He was cast as a titular character in the groundbreaking, incredibly daring film Alfie. Alfie Elkins was a cynical, womanizing, incredibly charming, and morally ambiguous Cockney driver who routinely broke the fourth wall, speaking directly to the camera to share his unfiltered, working-class philosophy with the audience. For the first time in cinematic history, the absolute center of a major motion picture was a man who spoke exactly like the fish porters and the charwomen of South London. He did not apologize for his accent. He did not soften his edges. He wore sharp suits, seduced beautiful women, and navigated the swinging 1960s with a cool, detached, and utterly hypnotic swagger. Alfie was a massive global phenomenon. The performance earned Michael Caine his very first Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. He was 33 years old. The 10-year exile in the freezing wilderness was officially, spectacularly over. The boy who had been mocked for his iron leg braces, the teenager who had accepted death in a foreign trench, and the struggling actor who had nearly starved to death in a damp room had fundamentally altered the cultural landscape. He didn't just become a movie star. He became the patron saint of the working class. He proved to millions of kids growing up in the slums of England that they did not need to change their voices to be heard by the world. He had won the war against the aristocracy. He had achieved absolute, unimaginable wealth and global adoration. But as the 1960s bled into the 1970s, the newly crowned king of cinematic cool was about to discover a terrifying, hidden danger within his own massive success. The sudden influx of millions of dollars, combined with the incredibly heavy, unresolved trauma of his past, was quietly pushing the confident, swaggering superstar toward the edge of an entirely different kind of abyss. He had survived the bullets of Korea and the poverty of London, but he was entirely unaware that he was about to face a highly publicized, deeply agonizing battle with a liquid demon. And the only thing standing between Michael Caine and total self-destruction was going to be a miraculous, life-saving vision he would suddenly spot in the most unlikely, absurd place imaginable, on a flickering television screen in a simple coffee commercial. The Vodka abyss, the angel from Guyana, and the justified sellout. There is a terrifying, universally misunderstood psychological phenomenon that occurs when a man who has been starving his entire life is suddenly, unexpectedly handed the keys to the kingdom. Society assumes that extreme, overnight wealth and global adoration will instantly cure all the agonizing traumas of the past. We believe that money acts as a magical eraser for pain. But for Michael Caine, becoming a massive, highly paid international movie star in the late 1960s did not erase his trauma. It simply mutated into a completely different, infinitely more insidious kind of terror. By 1971, Michael was in his late 30s. He had completely conquered the British film industry. He was earning staggering amounts of money, socializing with global elite, and living a glamorous, heavily publicized bachelor lifestyle in London. He had successfully outrun the freezing slums of Rotherhithe. He had outrun the brutal, muddy trenches of the Korean War. But he could not outrun his own mind. The boy who had grown up with nothing developed a profound, suffocating case of imposter syndrome. He was plagued by a relentless, invisible anxiety, a terrifying, whispering paranoia that at any moment, the universe would realize that it made a mistake, take all the money back, and violently toss him right back into the gutter. He was completely exhausted by the pressure of maintaining his newly minted cinematic godhood. When a man is consumed by an internal fire that he cannot put out, he desperately seeks a liquid anesthetic. Michael turned to vodka. He didn't just drink socially. He was self-medicating on an industrial scale. He was consuming up to 2 full bottles of vodka a day. He was still showing up to movie sets, still delivering brilliant performances, functioning as a highly polished, professional machine on the outside. But inside, he was quietly, methodically drowning himself. He was a man who had faced down enemy bullets in a foreign war with absolute bravery, but he was losing a silent, agonizing battle against a ghost in his own head. But the universe, operating with its trademark, incredibly unpredictable sense of poetry, was not going to let the Cockney legend disappear into the bottom of a bottle. It was preparing to orchestrate one of the most absurd, wildly romantic, and absolutely life-saving interventions in the history of Hollywood. One evening in 1971, a heavily intoxicated, deeply depressed Michael Caine was sitting in his London apartment with a friend, watching television. A commercial for Maxwell House Coffee came on the screen. The advertisement featured a stunningly beautiful, incredibly radiant young woman. Michael looked at the television screen, and the heavy, intoxicating fog of the vodka completely evaporated. He was instantly paralyzed. He looked at his friend and declared, with the absolute, unhinged certainty of a madman, that the woman on the television screen was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen in his life, and he was going to find her and marry her. He assumed, based on the backdrop of the commercial, that she was in Brazil. He packed his bags and prepared to fly to South America the very next morning just to search for a woman whose name he did not even know. But before he could board a plane to chase a ghost across the Atlantic, an acquaintance in the advertising industry delivered a miraculous, mathematically impossible piece of information. The woman was not in Brazil. She was an actress and model of Guyanese descent. Her name was Shakira Baksh, and she lived exactly 2 miles away from Michael's apartment, right there in London. Michael tracked down her phone number. He called her relentlessly, begging for a date. She initially refused, completely uninterested in the famous playboy reputation of the movie star. But Michael possessed the stubborn, unyielding grit of a survivor. He persisted until she finally agreed. When Michael Caine and Shakira Baksh finally sat across from each other, the chaotic, terrifying noise of Michael's existence permanently ceased. Shakira did not care about the Academy Award nominations. She did not care about the money. She possessed a quiet, profound, and intensely grounding elegance. She looked at the chaotic, brilliant, and heavily intoxicated actor, and she offered him the one thing the film industry could never provide: absolute, unconditional peace. Without her, I would have been dead long ago, Michael later confessed, stripping away all of his famous swagger to deliver a quote of breathtaking, bleeding vulnerability. I was drinking a bottle of vodka a day. She didn't say, "You gotta stop drinking." She just gave me a reason to want to stay sober. She became my right arm, my confidant, my partner. She saved my life. She gave me a reason to want to stay sober. Listen to the majestic, overwhelming beauty of that admission. For the audiences watching this, especially the men and women who know that true love is not about grand cinematic gestures, but about finding the one person who makes you want to be a better, healthier version of yourself. Their romance is the ultimate masterpiece. They were married in 1973 in Las Vegas. They welcomed a daughter, Natasha. Anchored by the profound, life-saving stability of Shakira's love, Michael put the vodka bottles away forever. He finally felt safe. But as he transitioned into his 40s and 50s throughout the 1970s and 1980s, a new, entirely different kind of controversy began to surround the newly sober, highly energized superstar. Having secured his family, Michael Caine adopted a professional strategy that completely infuriated the snobbish, elite cinematic critics of the era. The man who was universally hailed as a generational acting genius began accepting roles in some of the most spectacularly terrible, critically derided, and objectively awful movies ever made. He starred in disaster films like The Swarm and Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. He famously accepted a massive paycheck to star in the universally mocked sequel Jaws, The Revenge, in 1987. The film critics and the artistic elite mercilessly attacked him. They accused him of being a greedy, shameless sellout. They demanded to know why an actor capable of Shakespearean depth was willingly throwing his artistic dignity into the garbage just to collect a paycheck. But the critics, sitting in their comfortable, wealthy, academic bubbles, completely and fundamentally misunderstood the soul of the man they were judging. Michael Caine did not care about artistic dignity. Artistic dignity is a luxury reserved for people who have never had to wear clothes made from rags or sleep in a room without heating. When you have spent your childhood watching your mother scrub floors on her hands and knees until her joints swelled just to buy a piece of bread, you do not care what a newspaper critic thinks of your movie choices. You care about the bank cleared. When a journalist bravely confronted Michael about his decision to star in the catastrophic failure of Jaws, The Revenge, Michael did not apologize. He did not issue a PR statement defending the artistic merit of the film. Instead, the old-school, working-class street fighter looked the journalist dead in the eye and delivered the single greatest, most iconic, and unapologetic quote in the history of Hollywood. "I have never seen it," Michael stated flatly, flashing his trademark, cynical smile. "By all accounts, it is terrible. However, I have seen the house that it built for my mother, and it is terrific. I have seen the house that it built for my mother, and it is terrific." Listen to the absolute, thunderous, working-class glory of that statement. For the older audiences watching this, the men and women who spent 30 years working grueling, unglamorous, physically exhausting jobs that they hated simply to ensure that their children could go to college and their parents could retire in comfort. Michael Caine is not a sellout. He is a king. He took the millions of dollars from those terrible movies, and he bought his mother, Ellen, the former cleaning lady of South London, a magnificent, sprawling mansion. He ensured that the woman who suffered in the slums would spend the rest of her life surrounded by absolute, uncompromised luxury. He happily traded his cinematic prestige to ensure his family's survival. That is not selling out. That is the highest, most absolute form of masculine honor. By the 1990s, Michael Caine had successfully rewritten the stars. He had beaten his addiction. He had secured a 50-year, unbreakable marriage with Shakira. He had bought his mother an empire, and he was universally recognized as a British cultural treasure. He believed that he knew everything there was to know about his own history. He believed there were no more ghosts waiting in the closets of his impoverished childhood. But as his beloved mother, Ellen, approached the end of her life, a reporter from a tabloid newspaper was quietly, maliciously digging through old, classified hospital records. The press was about to unearth a deeply buried, incredibly tragic family secret that Ellen had successfully hidden from her famous son for over 50 years. The ultimate gentleman of cinema was about to discover that while he was busy conquering the globe, a hidden, deeply broken piece of his own bloodline had been locked away in a terrifying, silent darkness for half a century. And the revelation was about to test the absolute limits of his profound, newly healed heart. The 50-year secret, the Asylum, and the Lioness of Rotherhithe. There's a profound, incredibly heartbreaking assumption that we all make about the people who brought us into this world. As children, we look at our parents and believe that we know the absolute totality of their existence. We see their tired hands. We listen to their familiar voices. And we assume their history is an open book. But for the men and women who survived the merciless, freezing poverty of the early 20th century, survival often required the construction of heavy, impenetrable vaults. The poorest generation did not have the luxury of therapy. They did not have the luxury of sharing their trauma. They simply buried their deepest agonies in the dark, swallowed the key, and carried the crushing weight of their secrets entirely alone until the day they died. By the late 1980s, Michael Caine had officially achieved everything a dutiful son could ever possibly dream of. He was a multimillionaire, a two-time Academy Award-winning cinematic titan, and a globally worshipped icon. He had successfully rescued his beloved mother, Ellen, from the suffocating slums of South London. He bought her a magnificent, sprawling mansion, completely ensuring that the woman who had spent decades scrubbing floors on her hands and knees would spend the twilight of her life surrounded by absolute luxury. In 1989, Ellen passed away peacefully. Michael buried the woman he revered more than anyone else on earth, believing that the incredibly difficult, triumphant story of his working-class family was beautifully, completely finished. But the universe, operating with its terrifying, unapologetic sense of dramatic revelation, was about to exhume a ghost that had been locked away in the shadows for over half a century. In 1991, 2 years after Ellen's death, a reporter from a British tabloid newspaper was quietly, maliciously digging through old, classified public health records. The press was searching for a scandal to tear down the untouchable, wealthy superstar. And what they discovered in the dusty archives of a grim, heavily guarded psychiatric institution called Cane Hill Hospital was a revelation so absolutely staggering. It completely rewrote the entire architecture of Michael Caine's existence. The global media dropped the ultimate bombshell. Sir Michael Caine had a secret, older half-brother named David. David had been born to Ellen in the 1920s, several years before she ever met Michael's father. But the devastating tragedy of David's life was not the circumstances of his birth. It was a cruel, relentless betrayal of his own biology. David suffered from incredibly severe, debilitating epilepsy. To fully comprehend the sheer, unadulterated nightmare of this revelation, you must transport yourself back to the brutal, unforgiving social climate of the 1920s and 1930s working class. In that era, severe neurological conditions were not met with compassion or advanced medical care. Epilepsy was heavily, brutally stigmatized. It was frequently misunderstood as a form of madness or a curse. Faced with absolute, grinding poverty in a society that threatened to tear her child apart, Ellen made an agonizing, unimaginably painful decision to protect him from the cruelties of the street and to protect the future of the new family she eventually built. David was placed inside the cold, institutional walls of a mental asylum. The media expected Michael Caine to panic. They expected the polished, wealthy Hollywood superstar to hire a team of vicious lawyers, issue a blanket denial, or express profound humiliation that a member of his bloodline had been locked inside an asylum for 50 years. They wanted a scandalous, ugly celebrity meltdown. But the tabloid journalists completely underestimated the profound, magnificent, blue-collar backbone of Michael Caine. When Michael was informed of the secret, he did not call his publicist. He did not hide in his mansion. The man who had faced enemy fire in the frozen trenches of the Korean War immediately got into his car and drove straight to grim, towering iron gates of Cane Hill Hospital. Imagine the incredibly visceral, cinematic weight of that exact moment. The multimillionaire global icon walks through the sterile, echoing, bleach-scented hallways of a neglected institution. He is escorted into a drab, sparsely furnished ward. And there, sitting quietly in a chair, is a 65-year-old man whose mind has been ravaged by decades of severe seizures and heavy medication. Michael looked at the fragile, aging man. He didn't see a scandal. He didn't see a stranger. He looked directly into David's eyes, and he saw the exact same heavy, hooded eyelids that looked back at him in the mirror every morning. He saw the undeniable, unshakable reflection of his own mother. The multimillionaire superstar walked across the linoleum floor, bent down, and wrapped his massive arms around a broken, discarded brother he never knew he had. The story takes on an even more heartbreaking, deeply poetic layer when Michael discovered the quiet, isolated reality of David's existence. David did not know that the famous movie star Michael Caine was his brother, but according to the nurses, David kept a faded, torn magazine photograph of the actor pinned to the wall above his hospital bed. He simply liked the man in the movies. He had spent his entire life admiring his younger brother, completely unaware that they shared the exact same blood. But the most staggering, absolute tear-inducing revelation of this entire ordeal was not the discovery of his brother. It was a breathtaking realization of what his mother had silently endured. The hospital staff informed Michael that for 50 consecutive years, Ellen had never, ever abandoned her hidden son. Every single Monday, for half a century, the exhausted cleaning woman would quietly leave her house in South London. She would take multiple buses, riding for hours through the rain, the smog, and the freezing winters, just to sit in that asylum and hold David's hand. She bought him fresh clothes. She brought him sweets. She carried the crushing, agonizing weight of the secret completely alone. She never told her husband. She never told Michael. She successfully shielded her famous son from the heavy burden of her past, allowing him to fly to the absolute top of the world while she quietly continued to carry her heavy cross in the dark. Reflecting on the sheer, majestic magnitude of his mother's sacrifice, Michael stripped away every ounce of his Hollywood ego to deliver a quote of such profound, weeping reverence that it permanently solidifies his status as a true gentleman. "I was not angry with her. I was not ashamed," Michael confessed, his voice thick with a heavy, deeply emotional awe. "I was absolutely in awe of her. I thought, my God, the strength of this woman to carry that burden, that incredible sadness, completely alone for 50 years. She was a lioness. She protected all of us. She was a lioness. She protected all of us. Listen to the breathtaking, majestic dignity of that forgiveness. For the older audiences watching this, especially the men and women who grew up watching their own mothers and grandmothers quietly sacrifice their youth, their health, and their dreams, swallowing oceans of bitterness just to ensure their children could have a better life, Michael's tribute is the absolute, ultimate gospel of maternal love. He didn't judge her for the secrets of the 1930s. He crowned her as the ultimate hero of his entire existence. Michael immediately took over the absolute financial and emotional care of his older brother, ensuring that David spent the final, fragile months of his life surrounded by the best medical care and comfort money could possibly buy. When David quietly passed away in 1992, Michael was the one who buried him, finally laying the ghost of the Micklewhite family permanently, peacefully to rest. The 50-year secret had not destroyed the family's legacy. It had magnificently, beautifully completed it. Michael Caine had finally made peace with every single phantom of his past. He had conquered the extreme poverty of his youth. He had survived the deadly ambushes of the Korean War. He had defeated the vicious, suffocating classism of the British theater. He had beaten his fierce addiction to alcohol, saved by the radiant, enduring love of his wife, Shakira, and he had finally embraced the broken, hidden pieces of his own bloodline. His soul was completely, immaculately healed. But as the new millennium approached and the legendary actor gracefully transitioned through his 70s and into his 80s, the universe was preparing to issue its final, inescapable invoice. The man who had successfully outrun every single external enemy the world had ever thrown at him was about to face the one opponent that no amount of money, no amount of fame, and no amount of willpower can ever truly defeat. The heavy, metallic clanking of the iron braces from his childhood was about to return in a completely different, terrifying form. The ultimate, unyielding physical breakdown of his magnificent body was quietly waiting in the shadows of his twilight years. The return of the braces, spinal stenosis, and the ultimate escaper. There is a terrifying, magnificent, and mathematically flawless symmetry to the journey of human life. We spend the fiery, desperate decades of our youth trying to completely outrun the physical and psychological limitations of our childhood. We build towering castles, we accumulate billions of dollars, and we wrap ourselves in the finest tailored suits, entirely convinced that we have permanently escaped the vulnerabilities of our past. But if a man lives long enough, if he survives the wars, the alcohol, the critics, and the tragedies, the universe will inevitably quietly take him by the hand and lead him right back to the exact physical reality where his story began. As Michael Caine navigated through his 80s and approached the monumental, terrifying threshold of his 90th birthday, the absolute, undeniable biological bill for a lifetime of relentless labor was finally delivered to his doorstep. The man who had dominated over 160 movie sets, who had swaggered through the 1960s as the ultimate symbol of British cool, and who possessed the physical stamina to shoot back-to-back blockbusters for half a century, was suddenly confronted by an invisible, agonizing thief hiding deep within his own skeleton. He was diagnosed with severe spinal stenosis. To understand the sheer, unadulterated physical and psychological cruelty of this diagnosis, you must strip away the glamorous illusion of the Hollywood legend. Spinal stenosis is a highly progressive, excruciating condition where the spaces within the spine violently narrow, putting immense, agonizing pressure on the nerves that travel to the lower back and into the legs. It causes stabbing, burning pain, numbness, and ultimately a catastrophic loss of mobility. For the older audiences watching this, especially the men and women who wake up every single morning, command their legs to move, and realize with quiet, suffocating panic that their own bodies are refusing to obey the orders of their minds, Michael's diagnosis is an absolute, universally understood nightmare. It is the ultimate betrayal of the flesh. And here lies the most breathtaking, deeply poetic, and incredibly cruel irony of Michael Caine's entire existence. Remember the starving, impoverished boy from the 1930s slums of Rotherhithe. Remember the child who suffered from rickets, who was forced to wear heavy, squeaking, humiliating iron braces on his legs just to keep his fragile bones from collapsing. He had spent 80 years running away from those iron braces. He had built a multi-million-dollar empire, so he would never feel that helpless, crippled poverty ever again. And now, at 90 years old, despite all the Oscars and all the wealth in the world, the universe was forcing him to accept mechanical assistance once again. The iron braces had returned. Only this time, they took the form of a heavy, wheeled walking frame and a motorized wheelchair. The paparazzi, always hungry for the spectacular, tragic decline of the cinematic god, aggressively published photographs of the legendary actor looking frail, leaning heavily on his walking stick, or being pushed in a wheelchair by his devoted wife, Shakira. The media expected him to hide. They expected the proud, Oscar-winning titan to retreat into his mansion, close the curtains, and refuse to let the world see him in a state of physical diminishment. But Michael Caine is cut from a completely different, unyielding, working-class fabric. He did not hide. He did not apologize for his age. He wore his 89 years, his walking frame, and his physical pain with the exact same majestic, unapologetic dignity that he had once worn his James Bond-era suits. He accepted the cruel symmetry of his life with a brilliant, self-deprecating humor that completely disarmed the cruelest critics. "I can't walk, let alone run," Michael joked during an interview, flashing that iconic, heavy-lidded smile, completely stripping away the vanity of his profession. "I'm bloody 90 years old. I'm just happy I can still sit up and have a drink." He believed, quite reasonably, that his career was entirely, permanently finished. He had successfully transitioned into a peaceful, quiet retirement. But destiny, operating with its trademark, cinematic flair, was holding on to one final miraculous script. It was a script so incredibly profound, so deeply intertwined with the actual, lived history of his own soul, that the 90-year-old actor simply could not refuse it. In 2023, a director named Oliver Parker sent Michael the script for a film called The Great Escaper. The film was based on the astonishing, true story of Bernard Jordan, an 89-year-old British World War II veteran who famously broke out of his nursing home in 2014, secretly boarded a ferry, and traveled to France to attend the 70th anniversary commemorations of the D-Day landings in Normandy. When Michael read the script, the heavy, invisible armor he had worn for decades completely shattered. He wept. He was not just reading a movie, he was reading a mirror. Michael Caine was not a World War II veteran, but he was a combat veteran of the freezing, muddy, blood-soaked trenches of the Korean War. He intimately, painfully understood the deep, silent brotherhood of soldiers. He understood the heavy, suffocating survivor's guilt. He understood the desperate, burning need of an old man to perform one final, magnificent act of independence before the clock ran out completely. At 90 years old, fighting through the agonizing, radiating nerve pain of his spinal stenosis, Michael Caine agreed to step onto a movie set one last time. The physical reality of the production was incredibly grueling. "They gave me a very good walking stick," Michael later confessed, describing the sheer physical torture of his final performance. "And I was able to do scenes that needed that. I'd only do them once, and then fall over, but just one take, and that's it. I'd only do them once, and then fall over." Listen to the absolute, breathtaking heroism in that admission. For a man who had already secured his immortality, to willingly subject his 90-year-old, agonizingly painful body to the grueling demands of a film set, simply to honor the memory of a fellow veteran, is an act of pure, unadulterated cinematic martyrdom. He was not acting. He was giving his absolute, final physical breath to the camera. When The Great Escaper premiered in the autumn of 2023, it was not a massive, billion-dollar superhero blockbuster. It was a quiet, profound, and devastatingly beautiful meditation on aging trauma and enduring power of love. Michael's performance was hailed as an absolute masterpiece. He did not need to shout. He did not need to move quickly. He simply used his deeply lined face, his incredibly heavy, sorrowful eyes, and his gravelly voice to break the heart of the entire world. He proved that true cinematic gravity does not require physical agility. It only requires a soul that has actually lived. Following the release of the film, on a quiet morning in October 2023, Sir Michael Caine made an official, definitive announcement to the global press. "I keep saying I'm going to retire," Michael stated, his voice carrying the deep, peaceful resonance of a man who had completely emptied the tank. "Well, I am now. I've figured. I've had a picture where I played the lead, and it's got incredible reviews. What am I going to do that will beat this?" He was absolutely right. You cannot beat perfection. You cannot rewrite a flawless ending. He officially hung up his scripts. The longest, most prolific, and most astonishing career in the history of British cinema was completely, permanently finished. The boy who was told his Cockney accent was a curse had ended his 70-year journey as a knight of the British Empire, universally hailed as a god of the silver screen. But as the studio lights faded to black and the deafening applause of a grateful planet slowly subsided, the legendary actor was about to face the ultimate, quiet reality of his existence. He was going home to his beloved Shakira. He was stepping entirely out of the illusion of the movies and stepping fully into the heavy, beautiful, and profoundly mortal reality of his 93rd year on Earth. The final, most sacred chapter was beginning, and the old soldier was finally preparing to enjoy the ultimate, hard-won peace. The bonus years, the final frame, and the ultimate peace. There is a profound, almost unimaginable grace in knowing exactly when to leave the stage. In an industry that constantly, desperately fights against the inevitable ticking of the clock, where aging stars cling to the fading spotlight with suffocating, tragic vanity, the ability to simply bow your head, smile, and walk away is the ultimate, undisputed proof of a majestic soul. Today, in the spring of 2026, Sir Michael Caine is 93 years old. He has officially, permanently stepped out of the blinding, chaotic glare of the global cinematic machinery, the grueling 14-hour days on freezing movie sets, the relentless memorization of dialogue, and the heavy, exhausting armor of the Hollywood superstar have all been quietly, beautifully retired. To look at him today is to witness the absolute, undeniable physical reality of a man who has squeezed every single microscopic drop of experience out his time on Earth. The physical toll of 93 years is highly visible. The severe spinal stenosis has drastically restricted his mobility. The man who once swaggered to the swinging streets of 1960s London as the ultimate, sharp-suited playboy now relies entirely on a walking frame or a wheelchair to navigate the rooms of his quiet estate. But if you look closely at the deep, heavy-lidded blue eyes behind his signature glasses, you will not find an ounce of bitterness. You will not find a man mourning the loss of his youth. You will find a king who is absolutely, unequivocally satisfied with the reign he has completed. When asked in recent years about a perspective on aging and the terrifying, unavoidable specter of death, Michael did not offer a polite, sanitized Hollywood cliché. He offered the unvarnished, incredibly grounded wisdom of a man who has literally already died once before. "I am somewhat old," Michael confessed with a soft, deeply seasoned, and undeniably Cockney chuckle. "I know my days are numbered, but I am not afraid. I have had the best possible life I could have ever thought of. I have an incredible wife and the most beautiful family. You don't bounce around at 90 like you do at 20, but the alternative to getting old is dying young, and I managed to avoid that. The alternative to getting old is dying young, and I managed to avoid that." Listen to the absolute, staggering philosophical triumph in that sentence. For the older audiences watching this, especially the men and women who wake up every morning feeling the sharp, burning aches in their joints, who sometimes feel betrayed by their own aging bodies, Michael Caine's perspective is a brilliant, life-altering revelation. Growing old is not a punishment. It is a profound, incredibly rare privilege that is denied to millions. To understand the immense psychological bedrock of Michael's piece, we must return to the freezing, muddy, and blood-soaked trenches of the Korean War. We must remember the terrified 19-year-old boy named Maurice Micklewhite, entirely surrounded by enemy forces in the pitch-black valley, who had made absolute, terrifying peace with his own violent death. When that boy miraculously survived the ambush and walked out of the valley, he was operating on borrowed time. If you do the mathematics of his incredible existence, Michael Caine has lived for 74 years past his own expected expiration date. 74 years of bonus time. He took a clerical error from the universe, and he used it to win 2 Academy Awards, star in over 160 movies by his scrubbing, impoverished mother of mansion, and become a knight of the British Empire. How could a man possibly be angry about a wheelchair at 93 when he wasn't even supposed to make it to 20? He beat the house. The barefoot boy from the fish markets of Rotherhithe walked into the great casino of life with absolutely no money in his pockets, and he walked out having won every single chip on the table. Above all the spectacular billion-dollar victories he achieved, the greatest prize of his entire existence is the woman sitting quietly beside him. His marriage to Shakira Baksh has now surpassed 53 magnificent, unbroken years. In the ruthlessly cynical, superficial, and deeply treacherous ocean of the entertainment industry, a marriage that lasts over half a century is an absolute mathematical impossibility. But Shakira was never just a Hollywood wife. She was the angel who walked into his London apartment in the 1970s and gently, firmly took the 2 bottles of vodka out of his hands. She saved him from the dark, suffocating abyss of his own success. And today, as the 2020s march forward, she is still the absolute center of his universe. She pushes his wheelchair. She holds his hand. She is the quiet, immovable anchor that allows a legendary actor to feel completely safe in a body that is finally, inevitably winding down. I fell in love with her in about 8 minutes, Michael recently reflected, his voice thick with an adoration that half a century could not possibly dilute. And it has taken me 50 years to even begin to repay her for the life she gave me. As he sits in the peaceful, sunlit rooms of his home, surrounded by his daughters, Dominique and Natasha, and his adored grandchildren, the profound, poetic symmetry of his life is almost overwhelming. He was a child born to the freezing, agonizing void of the London slums, suffering from rickets, forced to wear heavy iron braces on his legs just to stand upright. He spent his entire life running away from those braces, running away from the poverty, running away from the snobbish, aristocratic directors who told him his thick, working-class Cockney accent was a curse that would guarantee his failure. He never changed his voice. He never apologized for his roots. He forced the entire global cinematic establishment to accept that a poor boy from South London could be the smartest, coolest, and most devastatingly elegant man in the room. He absorbed the secret, 50-year tragedy of his mother's hidden, institutionalized son, embracing his broken half-brother with a grace that completely redefined the concept of family honor. He swallowed his artistic pride, starring in terrible movies, absorbing the vicious mockery of wealthy critics, simply to ensure that his mother would never have to scrub another floor as long as she lived. Michael Caine is not just an actor. He is the ultimate, undisputed patron saint of the working class. The heavy iron braces of his childhood have returned in the form of a walking frame. But this time, they are not a symbol of poverty or malnutrition. They are the majestic, well-earned armor of a veteran who has successfully fought and won every single battle the universe dared to put in front of him. The camera lenses have finally been capped. The directors have yelled their final cut. The deafening, roaring applause of a grateful planet has slowly, beautifully faded into the quiet hum of a peaceful home. Sir Michael Caine has officially left the stage, but the magnificent, unbreakable echo of his working-class voice will resonate through the grand halls of cinema forever. The boy from the mud became a king, and the king is finally, unequivocally, and beautifully at peace. As we close the book on the spectacular, uncompromising, and profoundly inspiring journey of Sir Michael Caine, the camera turned away from the cinematic legend and focuses deeply, gently on you. Michael's story is a beautiful reminder that our origins do not dictate our destiny. He proved that true honor isn't found in prestigious titles or perfect reviews, but in the willingness to do whatever it takes, even facing the mockery of the world, to provide for the people we love. He taught us that growing older isn't a punishment. It is a magnificent privilege denied to so many. What about you? Have you ever worked a job you disliked or swallowed your own pride simply to ensure your family was taken care of? How do you find the courage to embrace the changes in your own body as the years go by? Please, take a moment to share your stories of sacrifice, your working-class pride, and your hard-earned wisdom in the comments below. Your journey of survival might be exactly the inspiration someone else needs to see today. If the story of unyielding grit and a 50-year romance moved you, please leave a like, share this video, and subscribe to our channel for more deep, unfiltered stories behind the legends we love. Thank you for your time. Be proud of your roots. Cherish your bonus years. And until next time, keep moving forward.